You might question the glasses, and it's only because I'm looking the part today. The reason why I'm looking the part is because even though it took me 6 months to ask them for it, I finally got it. Here it is, the Infiniti Q60 Red Sport 400. Let's check it out. Right off the bat, I can tell you it has 400 horsepower from a twin-turbo V6 engine. Check out the interior. Oh, yeah. All right, the engine's already on, mainly because one of the downsides to this car is that when you start it up, it's not very exciting. However, what I will tell you is, for some of you this might be exciting, the price. Off the bat, it's $59,555, and that's because it's fairly loaded. I have the technology package, direct adaptive steering, silver optic fiber interior accent trim, driver assistance package, and Premium Plus. As far as I'm concerned, that's loaded. And I'll tell you right now, if you are considering the Cadillac ATS V Coupe, go get that. If you're considering a Mercedes Coupe, or maybe a coupe from somebody else, this is what you should be looking at. Is it your first choice? Let's find out. I do have a stack of screens here. The first one is obviously going to be the backup camera and the navigation system. And I can configure not only the camera view to 360, which also finds traffic in the rear when I'm backing out and alerts me. This will actually do front camera, rear camera, all sorts of different camera angles, and it's kind of cool. But one other thing I can have here is if I change the map, I can do a full map, I can do a split map, intersection map, a turn list. I have all these different choices, as well as an eco drive report, which is stupid because this is obviously not the eco car. It's actually more of a car of contradictions, and I'll tell you about that as I go along. So let's just go ahead and go into drive and continue my little off-road journey here. Hopefully I won't bottom out. Does quite well on this off-road situation. One thing you will notice is that this car is very quiet. So even though it has a ballistic engine, part of that contradiction of this car is the engine always seems to be very eager, the transmission doesn't. The same thing with the steering. The car seems very eager to go in the direction it wants to go, and the steering doesn't. You end up finding yourself going really fast before you actually find the satisfaction you were looking for. So, off the line, this thing just spins its tires, and it's a little bit of a hoon. It's hard to control, and I think that's part of the problem here with direct adaptive steering. It's steer-by-wire, so it's more or less indirect steering. I've had so many settings that I've gone through here, I've just kind of given up on it. But as far as how this thing is on a daily basis, well, that's what I'm here to tell you about. Mainly, I think, and this is going to sound weird, I think 400 horsepower is too much for this car. Now, I have driven cars with 640 horsepower and cars with 500 plus horsepower. Even though I've driven the Q50 sedan with the same engine here, this is not the same car in a two-door form. So basically, if you're thinking the Q60 is a two-door version of the Q50, you are incorrect. This is a separate car. It just happens to have a very similar looking interior. It happens to have the same 400 horsepower engine and the same contrarian automatic transmission. As far as driving enjoyment, I do not like direct adaptive steering. It takes a lot away from the experience. The Q50 that I drove did not have it, so check that video out if you're interested. This one with all of that. Well, the only good thing here I can talk about is the technology that comes with this car, because I do have lane keeping aids, I have blind spot warning, but I also have a forward radar system that if I push this button here on the steering wheel, it will pace the car in front of me even without radar cruise on. That's kind of hard to explain, but basically if you are in stop and go traffic and you don't have radar cruise on, you always have the option to hit this button here, which will then brake the car to a complete stop in stop and go traffic. Button is on, I can see the icon. It won't recognize completely stopped cars, but because he's still moving, see that? But then it beeps and then it rolls forward, so I have to hit the brake. It will do that even with radar cruise on, which means that with radar cruise, when we come to a complete stop like this, it beeps and it will release the brake, meaning I have to touch the brake again. But once I touch the brake, without radar cruise, it's fine, because you see this green icon here shows that it's still active. But if I had radar cruise on in this stop and go traffic, when you touch the brake, cruise gets canceled, right? So I'd have to resume cruise control. Other cars, the car is held with that cruise control and then it resumes when you press a button or press the gas pedal. In this car, I have to press the gas pedal and accelerate and then reactivate cruise control. So that's a bit confusing, but at the same time, I have two methods to use this vehicle in stop and go traffic. I prefer this button here that does all the work. It also will steer the car. You can see the lanes on the side of the vehicle and then a warning there for the blind spot. So it uses that information only when activated to control the vehicle. If you're the person who wants a good-looking car that doesn't get too much attention, this is more of your kind of car. Now for me, I'd rather have a Q50, mainly because the way this thing looks and the way it sounds, it doesn't match up in my head. I can be in manual mode, move this over, and then use these paddles, and I can't really hear the engine. Listen. What is it doing? I don't know. All I have is a needle in front of me and a speed. I can't, there's nothing audible. I'll do it again. Downshift, third gear. There's no blip. There's no excitement. There's nothing going on in this car. And that's sort of disappointing. I have a sports coupe with not an electric parking brake, not a hand parking brake. I have a foot parking brake. And you'd think that when I complained about it in the Q50, by the time they got to their new Q60, something like that would have been engineered out of this car, because that is from last century. So there's a lot of stuff in this car that's very contrarian. It's very counterintuitive, but it's a very intelligent car, and it's a very good-looking car. When I was driving this through Austin the entire week, I basically had a blast getting a lot of attention. I got catcalled twice. Me, catcalled twice because of this car. I'm sure I could have been bald and over 50 and have a pot belly and still get catcalled in this car. It is very interesting that this car can attract so much attention, yet not deliver the goods that I want from behind the wheel of a sports car. My first impression of this Q60 is that it is definitely a GT. You can go from Austin to Vegas in this car, and you'd probably get there in a few hours. I don't think you'd even notice that your trip is hours and hours and hours. So if you can't tell how long your trip has been, I think that's a mark of a good vehicle. So while this car may have steering I don't care for, and it doesn't really deliver the performance goods you'd expect from 400 horsepower or the sound of $60,000, it does have these very subtle, ninja-like layers of comfort and luxury. And that's really what this car is about. This is not a 400 horsepower alternative, nor is it a 400 horsepower version of the Nissan Z. This is not a poor man's GTR. Although I can get all-wheel drive in this, at this price, it's only $2,000 shy of a CTSV coupe from Cadillac. Now, while this may have been designed by Prada in comparison to the Cadillac, which looks like it was designed by Cracker Barrel. What I have here is a car that is doing everything it can to keep me on the road and keep me safe and keep me comfortable during my drive. No matter where I'm going or how far or how short my drive, I arrive, period. This is not a car that's for the M4 buyer. This is not a car that's for the AMG buyer. This is someone who is looking at a Lexus Coupe or a Mercedes Coupe. This is right up there in that luxury realm. And as far as I know, this technology is unavailable on any other car. The ability to have predictive emergency braking, the ability to have lane aids that I can turn on or off from the steering wheel, but still have emergency braking. There's all sorts of technology here that wraps around the driver. And it's not really noticeable and it's not very intrusive. In addition to that, I have a haptic gas pedal. So if I drop it down here into eco mode, what that will do here is it will force back pedal pressure so that I don't floor the vehicle or go too heavy in the pedal. It's a way to keep me lighter on the acceleration. I don't care for that. So what I usually do is put it in Sport and Sport Plus. The difference between Sport and Sport Plus is obviously it dials the power a little bit differently. So one of the problems I have with this car is that in normal mode, traction control always kicks in. If I have the driving aids on and accelerate out of a corner, if traction control kicks in, it turns off the forward aid, and I have to basically toggle this back on. If I put it in Sport or Sport Plus mode, I get more leeway with traction control, and it's not so intrusive, and I like that. However, the big problem here is the suspension and the steering, because even though I have an adjustable suspension in sport mode, it doesn't feel any different. In the Q50, it felt different, noticeably different. In here, I really couldn't tell the difference. It may corner a little bit better, it may feel a little bit flatter, but it's a pretty rough ride even in normal mode. The one thing I would complain about on the comfort side is this seat belt. It doesn't adjust high enough and it just seems to rub right along my neck. That is not enjoyable, and I'll complain about that a few more times, especially if you watch my road trip. The other problem with the Q60 in general is that it doesn't have any storage space. I have a somewhat small bin in here. I have a bin in the doors and this tiny ashtray. So really, there's nowhere to put your cell phone. There's nowhere to put a little cigar humidor, I don't know, whatever you have. If you're a lady, you have a purse, it's gonna go in the back seat over here. So that's kind of a drawback. But basically that's it. This is the Q60 400 Red Sport. It's the red S on the back is how you can identify one of these. If it can ever hook up onto the ground, it will go from 0 to 60 in pretty good time. Still not as quick as the ATS-V Coupe. Thanks for watching.